Morning, afternoon, actually, everyone. We're back inside. I was thinking about doing my video outside today, but it's pretty windy here, and I don't know how the microphones would do with that wind. So I decided to do it inside. I might as well get used to it. We live in Michigan, and we go from summer to Arctic temperatures pretty quickly, and I might as well get used to being in here. So I am. I'm inside. I'm hoping we get a couple more nice days before it really turns, but we might not. So we're going to keep going from what we did last time. I want to review that real quick. So in our first look at how our leaders are supposed to be, we saw a couple of lessons. First, we saw that our leaders should be led and influenced by their religious beliefs. They should not leave it at the door. And we also saw that our walk with Christ should impact every aspect of our daily life. It should be in all parts of us. And we've seen that in our study here at BCC of the Shema we did for a few weeks this fall. So today's, we take some of that, what we talked about last time. If you didn't, I encourage you to go back and listen to it. Actually, Reverend William Rowland will do it for us. He was a pastor in New Hampshire, and this is a message he gave to the New Hampshire legislature, but it was a pretty common thing throughout the time in 1796, and it was dealing with an election. And I know that I'm talking to quite a few people that may have already voted. I just heard that they estimate something about 35 million people have already voted. I get that, but there's a part of me that doesn't like the early voting thing because we have a date to vote. And what if something happens between the time you vote in October and November 3rd? And so I think people should wait. I don't think you need to mail in your ballot. If you can go to Meijer, if you can go to Walmart, if you can go out to eat, you can go vote. But that's my soapbox. So, but what's going to happen today is Reverend Rowland is going to lay out why it's important for civil authorities to have religion and their beliefs play a part in their work and why we should be looking for it. He'll go through what happens when leaders follow Christian principles and they let their beliefs influence them. And then he'll go through the opposite of what happens when there is no moral compass, which as you listen to it, it sounds a lot like the society we live in today. So I'm just sharing a portion of this. This will still take a few minutes to get through, and then I'll wrap it up at the end. So this is Reverend Rowland, quote, "I proceed to the last thing proposed, which was to exhibit the necessity of religion in civil administrations and its happy effects in society. Religion is necessary to the happiness of society, and without it, civil government cannot subsist. Man is endowed by his great author with social faculties, but so great is his depravity that selfishness predominates in his heart, and he has lusts and passions which, if under no control, would fill the world with vice and its attendant misery. The faculties by which he is raised in the scale of being make him more subtle in planning and assist him in effecting his wicked and destructive purposes. If the mind be impressed with no idea of God, every object of pursuit may be contemplated with a supreme regard, and the selfish would gain a complete ascendancy over the benevolent affections. The age of religious principles, in union with the powers and faculties natural to man, are insufficient to restrain his irregular and mischievous passions, and the latter without the former must be much more so. The light of nature indeed teaches the existence of a God and an all-wise and glorious providence, when her dictates are suitably attended to, and when they are not, and men boast themselves as men of reason, and through sophistry and ridicule attempt to subvert religion in the hearts of men, the age of reason becomes an age of more than Egyptian darkness. To guard men against the lusts and furious passions of each other, civil establishments, always known to be insufficient, have been connected with or have had recourse to the aids of religion. What could be the origin of society without this connecting bond? And in societies formed, nothing can so powerfully induce the ruler to a wise administration of government and a faithful discharge of all the duties of his office, or so ensure the obedience of subjects. A ruler cannot be supposed to lose the feelings of the man by an elevation to office. He has the same passions to govern and lusts to conquer, and the government and victory of these is rendered more difficult by the temptations which are increased, and the opportunities for gratifying them which are multiplied by the situation in which he is placed. I think we've seen that, this is a side note, but I think we've seen that play out in a lot of states through this whole coronavirus thing. People got a taste of power, and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. There are many, perhaps, whose conduct is inoffensive in the stations of private life, who, if they swayed a scepter, would become Neros. But how much soever warmed with true patriotism the hearts of civil rulers may be, they cannot calculate upon the interest of their subjects in the righteous administration of their legal power. With respect to secret crimes and crimes where numbers and power are enlisted on the side of the transgressors, coercion will be weak and government of no avail. Set aside the influence of religious principle, and the members of the community have no ground for rational trust and confidence in each other. He's talking about what happens when someone doesn't follow God and they lead. No oath could be administered in such a society. They would live each moment in a state of alarm. Government would lose all its energy. Society would be full of disorder, confusion, and every evil work. The voice of joy would not be heard. The name of happiness would not be known, and being itself would be a curse. Sounds like today. If the being and attributes of the Most High and all-wise, powerful, and holy providence and the retributions of eternity are acknowledged, the state of things is surprisingly altered for the better. Rulers may exercise the powers with which they are invested, and the people whom they govern will obey their laws and feel that their guardian care is a source of mutual happiness to the society of which they are members. Those who are cordially disposed to lead quiet and holy lives cannot fail to realize that their interest and happiness are rendered as safe as this state and the existing circumstances with which they are surrounded can possibly make them. And on the other hand, men of bad hearts and evil dispositions will not be able to run into those excesses, to which their unbridled lust would lead them without counteracting the dictates of conscience, bursting asunder the strongest bands of society and hazarding or giving up life, property, and all that is worth living for. The sacred books teach us the being and attributes of God. They exhibit his majesty, his holiness, his justice, his goodness, his mercy, and his truth, his omnipresence, his spirituality, his omniscience, his supreme and unlimited dominion, his readiness to pardon, and his determination to reward the righteous and punish the wicked and impenitent. They also bring us acquainted with our nature, state, and circumstances, with our misery and mode of our cure. They point out our duty in every situation, in every relation, and in all the circumstances of human life. They encourage our rational hopes and animate us by the most sublime motives. All other things which are deemed necessary to our peace in the connected and social state will not avail without this. No natural principles, nor the best forms of government will be sufficient without the conducting guidance and powerful energy of religion. This clearly shows that the civil ruler is to be considered as God's minister, and that the subject ought to yield obedience to good and salutary laws, not only for wrath, but for conscience sake. The beauty of the Christian system is exhibited, and its advantages to connected minds, in many and various respects. It purifies the heart and amends the life. It refines, ennobles, and exalts the affections. When the civil order is broken in upon by the licentious and disorderly part of society, when men of weak heads and dishonest hearts officiously attempt to guide the affairs of state and to arraign at their bar, the well-tried and chosen patriots of the Commonwealth, our religion commands them to study the things which make for peace, to submit to good government as the ordinance of God, and to obey magistrates as his ministers to them for good. It enjoins patriotism as a common duty, and whatsoever we would that others should do unto us, that we do the same to them, and extend a generous benevolence to the whole race of man. The malevolent passions and corrupt feelings and depraved nature, if unrestrained, would predominate over the better principles, the social and humane dispositions of man, and involve society in calamities too many to enumerate and too horrible to think upon. The religion of Jesus rectifies the foil of the heart, eradicates those evil dispositions which have been cultured there, plucks up every plant which his good hand hath not planted, restrains the passions by bringing them under its happy dominion, and fills society with tranquility and order. It cultivates the minds of men, the purest and the sublimest principles of virtue. It reclaims them from all those paths of iniquity in which, through the solicitations of the wicked and the allurements of false honor and worldly pleasure, they may have wandered, and makes them good men and useful members of community. It secures and promotes the interests of government and the prosperity of its subjects. It directs rulers and people to the duties which are peculiar to their respective places, and by setting before them the most glorious motives, sweetly constrains and allures to the discharge of them. It promotes peace, it breathes benevolence, it cherishes the kind and social affections, and rectifies the morals of mankind. It prohibits everything that is injurious to our happiness or the interests of those who are about us. When all the members of a community are under its influence, religion, and conduct agreeably to its requirements, they form the most beautiful and happy society. The voice of profaneness, fraud, and licentiousness will not be heard in the streets. Iniquity will stop its mouth and virtue triumph. Society is happy in proportion as religion flourishes, but religion has something nobler in its view and tendency than the civil governments of the world. It looks forward into eternity. Yet it is as friendly to the happiness of men in the present state as if it embraced no other subject. It is a dishonorable idea of religion and degrading to its author that some entertain an idea that religion is a substitute to civil government and looks no farther than the present state. We have no reason to think from anything we can find in the sacred books that our blessed Lord designed to intermeddle with or in any respects change the civil establishment of mankind. His kingdom, he expressly tells us, is not of this world. He suffered princes and potentates to remain where they were, and left men to decide all matters of controversy with respect to them by the principles of reason and their civil laws or forms of government. He inculcated lessons of obedience to them and wrought a miracle to pay tribute when he knew that he should have been excused. The religion of Jesus is replete with the wisest maxims of civil polity, and inculcates them by the most inviting rewards and the most dreadful punishments. To secure the favor of the Most High is to render to society the most essential advantage. They who rule for God, who protect his church, who are animated by his religion and exemplify in their public administrations and in the private walks of domestic retirement all the virtues of the Christian, and they only, can govern with safety to themselves and advantage to their constituents. They will mutually share with the people the blessings which they diffuse. Under their wise counsels and determinations, religion will flourish. This will make them honorable and respectable to themselves. It will encircle them with a glory which the breath of mortals will not be able to take away, and raise them to seats of immortal honor. Civil rulers are the guardians of the people. They will not separate the public weal from their own private happiness, nor feel satisfied with their labors unless they are directed to the advantage of the community. They will derive the highest pleasure in the administrations which secure to those under their charge their rights and liberties, civil and sacred. Rulers who use their influence to set aside the maxims of gospel morality and piety forego the important and numerous advantages which might accrue to themselves from the happy disposition of subjects governed by the purest motives and trained to the most virtuous conduct. If society were formed upon laws of religion, its members would faithfully render to all their dues, cheerfully obey their governors in the proper and rightful exercise of their authority, and in this way strenuously and constantly endeavor to promote the happiness of each other and of the body politic. But if rulers are so impolitic and wicked as by their example or influence to banish religion, they may reasonably expect that the people to whom they give laws will treat them with no more respect than they that treat the sovereign ruler. And that they will endeavor, as far as they are able, to disregard their authority and evade or violate their commands. The social interest is a vain and wild fancy without religion. Let religion and the virtues which it inculcates be banished, and the basis of public order and private tranquility are at once subverted. The human character loses its dignity and has nothing to recommend it above the herd of the forest. Nothing can lessen the beauty, obscure the brightness, or tarnish the glory of that morality which the gospel inculcates. To conform to this, he who is called to the arduous duty of ruling over men must be just, ruling in the fear of God. Parents must be wisely tender and indulgent towards their children, and children must be obedient to their parents. Masters must be gentle and servants diligent. Ministers must be watchful, and the people to whom they minister must take heed how they receive and hear, and hold fast and repent. It teaches all in whatsoever state we are to be content, to be grateful for every enjoyment, and submissive under all the sorrows of human life, to give our hearts to him who hath made, sustained, and redeemed us, and keep ourselves unspotted from the world. If the laws of religion be viewed in their spirituality, extent, and tendency, reason and equity will be found their basis. And if he who is raised to the seat of power pays no regard to this morality, he has acquired only a fancied elevation, a sorry preeminence above his brethren. But he who is sincere and diligent in his endeavors, faithfully to discharge the duties of his station, hath an honor which enmity and malevolence, with all their poison, will not be able to blacken. In the social and public, as well as in private life, there is an inseparable connection between holiness and happiness, between sin and misery. From the attributes of the Most High and merciful ruler, the common dealings of his providence, and the declarations of his holy word, we may conclude that he will bless, defend, and increase a virtuous nation, and will leave those who are wicked to suffer the fatal consequences of their own wickedness. The history of the world is full of examples that in proportion as public virtue and an attention to the duties of religion have increased or diminished, so the wealth, credit, and powers of all states and empires have flourished or decayed. Righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Rulers, therefore, who are the ministers of God, are in duty bound to lend their aid to promote religion. If you need to, rewind and listen to other parts. There were some very important things in there that he was stating. And he really makes the point that a leader should be focused on what God says. And something more to understand, and very few public servants, public officials, I'll say, very few of them are servants, public officials, understand that they are subject to God for the actions that they take. Good happens for the people when the leaders look to God, and bad happens to the people when they don't. What is to remember really is in Ephesians chapter 1, verse 15 through 23, is that God is above all rulers. Those rulers are held accountable to God for what they do and how they do it. There are dozens of scriptures regarding the type of ruler someone is to be, but mostly the important thing to understand is that they submit to God. If you haven't voted yet, if you're waiting till November 3rd like I am, look for people who have that attitude in heart. Look for people who seek actual betterment of others, who look to the scripture, who believe in God. And when you do that, you will most likely find benevolent leaders who more often than not are good leaders, people who care. The best leaders our nation has ever had are those who truly put the nation first and didn't care about their own fame or just having the power. It was about service. And that's really what he's arguing here. We're going to finish up this message next week as he lays out more about what we should be looking for in our leaders. And I pray that God is leading you and he's leading the people around you And he's leading our nation. Be in prayer for our nation, because no matter who wins the election, I have my person, but no matter who wins the election, it's going to be ugly afterwards. If President Trump wins re-election, you're going to have riots and protests and people who say they will not accept the results. If you have Biden win, there'll be people calling for his immediate removal based on what they're finding in the family and corruption. I mean, it's going to be a mess. But we always can have peace in that mess because we have Jesus Christ. We have God. If you're watching this, you're most likely a believer in Jesus Christ. And so we can have peace as we go forward into these things because he's got it. He knows what's going to happen. He knows how it's going to turn out. And I know who wins in the end. And so grab onto that no matter what is going down. I just want to close with our usual goodbye. Be blessed. Be a blessing. God loves you.